Hey guys, and welcome back to day two, or I guess day three. I don't know, I'm gonna lose track of this already. Anyway, as promised, we're gonna go over another topic here. So we are gonna go over the declining IQ, and why I say that that's such a huge factor in everything in the world. I should have showed this off first and started with these on the channel, but I don't know why we didn't. We just did not. So bad on me. We will start covering these and get these out of the way before we kind of move into the other stuff. Just because I feel it's important to have this context in mind. Because I'm always going to kind of circle back to these points a lot of times. So I feel like that's good that we just get it out of the way. Everyone's on the same page and we can just move forward together. So I did just try to do a video, but all the data got corrupt as soon as I went to save it. So, error on my end, live and learn. We're going to try this again, but we are going to try to maybe speed it up a little quicker. Rather than going through a lot of this stuff, I'm just going to try to hit on the points that emphasize the point I'm trying to make. If you want to watch the full video and get all the in-between stuff, it's always going to be in the description. You're more than welcome to go check it out. Veritasium is a great channel. I always suggest fully supporting him. And, well, dog's tearing apart the bed. So, without further ado, let's go check it out.
In popular culture, the term IQ is...
I will say I'm going to leave a little bit of intro just so we can kind of get some context to what we're doing, and then I'll kind of bear with me as I get Tourette'sy and kind of skip through the video a little bit and just kind of hammer on the points that I'm specifically trying to make. I also wish I could have found a shorter video, but this is the only one that honestly does it all justice. I would honestly suggest watching the whole entire video, but yeah, we'll hit the points that we need to hit at least. So
everywhere.
Do IQ exams do that? You probably need 120 points of IQ.
Don't know my IQ.
IQ.
Low IQ individual.
People who boast about their IQ are losers.
When people say IQ, what they mean is intelligence, an objective, rigorous measurement of intellectual ability. But does it actually work? Well, in this video, I want to find out where IQ came from, what does it actually measure, what can it predict about your life, and I guess, what is my IQ? I have never taken an official IQ test before.
Honestly, I don't think I'm terribly smart.
I've always kind of considered my IQ to be maybe just a little above average.
Exothermic or endothermic?
I feel like that should be exothermic.
Good job, science guy.
let me know if any of you know what that is. I don't. I've watched this video several times. I'm not gonna lie, not that clever in science.
There are a lot of IQ tests online, but I am very skeptical about their accuracy. Still, I figured some of them may be good practice for the real thing. Tomorrow, I'm going to do an IQ test for real. Before I do that, I want to try to improve my score, and so I'm going to try to do a whole bunch of practice tests. I think this test is trainable, but tomorrow we're going to see whether that's true or not. The idea of intelligence testing goes back hundreds of years, but the first concrete breakthrough occurred in 1904. English psychologist Charles Spearman was studying students' grades in different subjects, and he wondered how their performance in one subject, like English, would relate to their performance in another, like math. One option would be that the better a student did in math, the worse they would do in English, maybe because they spent more time on their math work and so had less time to devote to English. So performance in different subjects would be negatively correlated. Another option was that performance in one subject would be completely unrelated to performance in another. After all, different subjects require different skill sets, so maybe marks would be totally uncorrelated. The third option was that the better a student did in math, the better they would do in English. In other words, their marks would be positively correlated. A correlation coefficient can vary anywhere from -1 to +1. A correlation coefficient of -1 indicates a perfect negative correlation, meaning an increase in one variable corresponds to a precise, predictable decrease in the other variable. Similarly, a correlation of +1 indicates a perfect positive correlation. A correlation of 0 indicates no relationship between the two variables. and any value between 0 and 1 indicates a positive correlation, but the data has some random spread. The square of the correlation coefficient tells you the amount of variation in one variable that can be explained by variation in the other variable. For example, if the correlation coefficient is 0.5, then 25% of the variation in one variable can be explained by the other. When Spearman analyzed his data, he found a clear positive correlation. Students who did better in math also tended to do better in English, and the correlation coefficient was 0.64. But math and English weren't the only subjects the students studied. They also took classics and French, and when Spearman looked at the correlations between all of these subjects, he found the same pattern. Students who did well in one subject tended to do well in them all. So how do you explain this observation? Well, Spearman proposed that each person has some level of general intelligence, what he called the G factor.
Introducing Grammarly, like you've never seen before.
They always kick in with ad. But no, this is important stuff I would agree on so far.
How quickly students could learn new material, recognize patterns, and think critically regardless of the subject matter, which explains why students' scores across subjects are correlated. Those with high G score well on all subjects, and those with low G score poorly on all subjects. Spearman published his conclusions in a paper titled General Intelligence Objectively Determined and Measured. But the correlations weren't perfect. So on top of the G factor, Spearman proposed subject-specific factors, or S factors. A student's performance in math, for example, would depend on their general intelligence plus their subject-specific factor for math. Subject-specific factors could increase or decrease performance on that particular subject. Spearman believed that specific factors could be trained, but general intelligence was fixed. So he wanted to find a way to reliably measure general intelligence. At around the same time in France, Alfred Binet was tasked with figuring out which kids needed more help in school. Together with Theodore Simon, he developed the Binet-Simon test. Students were asked to name what's missing in the drawing, define abstract terms, and repeat back sentences. And there was also this question asking which face is prettiest. There were 30 tasks in all. Their performance was benchmarked against other students of different ages in order to assign them a mental age. For example, if a student performed about as well as the average 8-year-old, their mental age would be 8. This mental age was then divided by their actual age and multiplied by 100 to arrive at a so-called intelligence quotient, and IQ was born. So the Binet-Simon test was the world's first IQ test. It was translated by Goddard into English and brought to the US. At Stanford, Lewis Terman standardized it using a large American sample.
And I will admit, like, things have changed since, as we're going to get into that in a second here, but it's just good to learn the history of this. This is how it evolved. There's always so much misconceptions around this, so this is how it came to be, and this is how it evolved, our form of standardized IQ testing.
And with some modifications, it became the Stanford Binet test. And for decades, it was the most widely used test in the United States. But this was just the start. Many other IQ tests were developed, and they all had the same goal of measuring the G factor. The way they did this was by assessing many different mental abilities, including memory, verbal, spatial, and numerical skills. Each one of these areas might have a subject-specific shift, but by averaging them all together, the idea was the subject-specific effects would cancel out, leaving a decent approximation of G. Of course, there would always be some error, but that's why psychologists designed IQ tests with upwards of 7 to 10 sections with distinct tasks to try to minimize subject-specific distortions. All the different IQ tests differed in the number of questions and their difficulty. So to standardize the scoring system, each test was given to a large sample of the population. Raw scores were normalized, usually so the mean was 100 and the standard deviation was 15. And that's how it's still done to this day. This is known as IQ, and it's meant to be a measure of an individual's G factor in comparison to the rest of the population. The way it's scaled, 68% of people have an IQ between 85 and 115. Only around 2% score over 130 or under 70. 11 lions, 4 cats, and 7 crows have a total of... Oh, boy. As I was studying for my IQ test, I practiced all the different types of questions that appear on modern tests.
I want you to keep that in mind, though. They try to balance the scale where only 2% falls basically below the legal definition of mental retardation. Let me just pull this back up for 1 second here. So 2%, 70 is the legal line for mental retardation. That was the standard throughout the scientific community. So they try to keep this about a 2%. You'll see, when I say that society is getting stupider, humans are getting stupider, you're going to see in a moment why I'm saying that. But
I was studying for my IQ test, I practiced all the different types of questions that appear on modern tests. One section will almost certainly be on vocabulary. They give you one word, like sanguine, and you have to pick which of the multiple choice options is most... The correlations typically range from 0.2 to 0.6, and the effect is most notable for more complex jobs, which makes sense. The highest effect is for military training. In fact, the US military will not accept anyone with an IQ under 80. They also limit to 20% the number of recruits with IQs between 81 and 92.
Imagine being able to build anything.
Try to save some time when we get an ad.
During the Vietnam War, in order to increase the pool of applicants, they relaxed this last requirement. But what they found was that those below the threshold were 1.5 to 3 times as likely to fail recruit training, and they required between 3 to 9 times as much remedial training. Taken together, this added so much strain that the military ran more efficiently without the extra recruits. In total, 5,478 people recruited under this initiative died, at a fatality rate 3 times higher than ordinary recruits. So the military reinstated their requirements, and today anyone with an IQ less than 80, that is about 30 million Americans, would be ineligible to join the military.
So that's the point I want to touch on here. Like I said, when you look at 30 million Americans, he says, right? I have it all brought up right here. Like we showed in the chart there a moment ago, they're aiming for about 2%. For anyone who doesn't know math, we're just under 10%. Oh, no, I shouldn't say we, I mean Canada. But, yeah, that's just under 10% of the entire population. That means 1 out of 10 people in America literally meet the definition of mental retardation. And the reason why I'm bringing this up, and I'm not trying to target our little American allies, or I should say big American allies here. Canada is in the same spot. That's why I'm bringing this up. It's no different up here than it is there. So if this applies there, it's applying here 1-to-1, if not worse. But keep in mind though, 30 million people. Now, it's going to be a bit controversial, but I'm going to have some fun with this. We all have to have some fun sometimes. But I want to point something out. Call it irrelevant, call it what you want. But, let me pull this up. Look how many people voted for each side in the last election. I don't care what side you voted for, that's fine. But imagine 30 million idiots not voting. Think about how these numbers would change. Think about how that would impact the world, If we didn't allow these guys to run businesses, to make these decisions instead of of corporate businesses and all these types of stuff. Like, if we didn't allow this in our politics, think of the difference this would make. Again, whatever side you think they're on, take it as you will. But my point still remains. 30 million people out of 340 million. That's a lot of people. So when you sit here and see me say, man, there's a lot of idiots out there. There are a lot of retards out there. There's a lot of imbeciles and morons and clowns. And we live in a clown world. I'm not sitting here trying to be a dick. This is the medical definition of these terms. This is why they exist. Below 70 IQ is retarded. It's not hate speech.
Even outside the military, IQ seems to play a role in how long you live. In a Scottish study, scientists uncovered IQ tests from kids when they were 11 years old. Now, 65 years later, they checked to see who from the sample was still alive at age 76. And they found that on average, for every 15-point increase on the IQ test, you would be 27% more likely to still be alive at age 76. A large meta-analysis confirms that people with higher IQs have a lower risk of dying during the time frame investigated in each study. The last major thing that IQ seems to predict is income. This study shows a clear tendency for income to increase with IQ, and it found a correlation coefficient of 0.3. But the variance is huge. In fact, the top 3 earners in this study all had IQs below 100. A large meta-analysis of 31 studies found the correlation between IQ and income to be 0.21. That is significant, but small. It means that only 4.4% of the variance in income is explained by IQ.
Maybe one of the reasons why we don't see as high a correlation for income is just because economically intelligence is not necessarily that highly rewarded, in that maybe there are jobs, like just doing a real estate type scheme, like maybe that doesn't require a huge amount of intelligence. Simultaneously, you have all these very highly intelligent people who maybe become college professors, but that doesn't necessarily pay very well.
Yeah.
So, a point I want to touch on here, and I mean, it's an okay example he uses, but I think there's a better one out there we can kind of hit home on. And I'm not trying to disrespect or discredit these guys in any shape, way, or form, but being Canadian, we got the oil rigs up here. Sure, there are people up there that are planning big projects, doing all this architectural stuff and yada yada, and drafting papers and documents and designs, blah blah blah. That stuff, yes. But even, you know what the average worker makes? Just a low level grunt laborer out there. Insanely more than any of our top professors. I can guarantee you that. I'm not complaining about how much they make or anything like that, but I'm just saying it's a clear example on how intelligence just clearly isn't valued as much within society as even something just as, carrying a bucket of oil or something. So it's just, that's a good thing, I think, to point. Well, I don't know, it's good to point out, but it's just something worth noting.
A lot of people who have very high intelligence scores don't have the same interest in accumulating money.
The relationship with net worth is even weaker. It hardly seems to correlate with IQ, even though people with higher IQs are supposedly more intelligent and on average they make more money each year. But this apparently doesn't translate into saving or accumulating more wealth overall. But if IQ correlates with school achievement, job performance, income...
One thing I will say about that is I think it's just what we're shown and what we're taught. We're never, at least me, I've never seen any business stuff, any long-term goals pitched to me. No one's ever really talked about that. And I'm 32, and I don't know about you guys, maybe your family, maybe your parents or something have ever discussed it. Maybe you've heard them talking with theirs about it. I'm not sure. But this is something that's never really been brought up in my world, to be fair. And I started thinking about this a few years ago, and for my son and stuff like that even too. And generational wealth is something of the past, and there's several reasons for it. We can go into more each topic in the future, but one of the biggest things though is just try. I know the information is not that much out there, but just try to find it. And mostly try to figure it out for yourself. Don't listen to YouTubers or someone that says oh, go dump your life savings into this crypto, or don't go do all of this. I would never tell you which, say, specific thing to put your money into, but I would say at least pick a program that allows you to try something. Go do your own research and try it. Start building these nest eggs for you and your family. Start building something for your kids' future. as far as I know, the best way to kind of pass it down, because we have like, at least up here in Canada, like all these death tax kind of stuff, quote unquote, like capital gains for the children and stuff that are going to inherit it. The best thing I've seen so far is kind of like slapping in a trust and all that. And then like ownership of assets is never actually really changing when you inherit it to the kids and stuff. So then I think, from my understanding, that's kind of a little cheesy way to kind of get past some of these laws in a legal way. If someone's a lawyer or something, correct me. Don't put your life savings on what I just said right there, because again, the financial aspect, I'm not giving any advice out on that. You can look more into that yourself. But there are ways. It's just stuff's not very public, and information's not given out much about that. So it's something you need to look into yourself. And there's obvious reason why it's not given out so much too, because of liability. Again, if I told you to go pump in a certain thing and all of a sudden it goes bad, now I'm the next Logan Paul. I don't want that. So I'm never going to tell you where to put anything in or nothing, but do some research on your own, and you need to be proactive in building these future things for yourself. Whether you're on the higher end of IQ or the lower end, it's not that hard. Put some money in, whatever you can afford to lose. Don't go missing your rent payment because of this, but put whatever you can in and just try to learn. That's the best. Just try to learn.
Income and longevity, why don't we hear more about it? Why aren't more people tested? I think it's because IQ has a dark history.
So
when Henry got a time.
Go over that a
Plus,
little bit.
intelligence might not be a single construct as initially imagined. These days, scientists recognize two forms of intelligence, fluid and crystallized. Fluid intelligence is your ability to learn, process information, and solve novel problems, whereas crystallized intelligence involves the knowledge you've accumulated over your lifetime. Both types of intelligence increase throughout childhood, but fluid intelligence peaks in early adulthood and then declines, whereas crystallized intelligence remains more stable. But IQ has been further misused to promote the idea of racial differences in intelligence. There is, for example, an observed gap between the average IQ of black and white Americans. Articles have also been published on the IQs of different nations around the world. Many of these nations are purported to have average IQs below 70. That's the cutoff for intellectual disability.
Let that sink in for a minute. And I realize, like, you know, I'm not trying to throw stones at anyone in particular here, but just to make a point. You know, I realize there might be some small little village in Africa or something that doesn't have all the latest textbooks and all this crazy stuff and all, and I get that. I'm not disputing that. So we obviously will see some, that's what I'm looking for. A bit of tilt in the stuff like that towards that, but that can't be the excuse for every one of these countries here that are falling below the metric and stuff like that. If we go look into it, I'm sure the governments could do something about it. I'm sure, you know, in certain countries that are below, I'm not saying all, but certain ones could be putting more investment into stuff. But again, it's not a priority. It's just not. It's just absolutely mind-blowing to me how much not our society, but just the whole world in general is just sinking. And we have so much information at our fingertips with technology. I'm just flabbergasted how this is even possible.
How could this be? The conclusion that some draw is that there are genetic differences between races or nations in intelligence. But I think that's a gross misrepresentation of the data. The problem, I'd argue, is that IQ tests don't necessarily measure what you think they're measuring. And the proof is that there's a representative sample of white Americans whose average IQ is 70. Who are these people? Just ordinary Americans who lived around 100 years ago.
Nowadays, they're all the middle upper class white Karens that have nothing better to do with their time. And you see them on CNN, on Fox, on all these things at every protest and at every rally. Those are the ones nowadays. You don't have to look back 100 years. You go look yesterday's news. You'll see the 70 IQ people on there.
Researcher James Flynn studied the average results of IQ tests over the past century. And every so often, the tests get updated and renormalized to keep their average at 100. Now, what Flynn noticed was that each time they got renormalized, the scores had to be shifted down a bit more, by about 2 or 3 IQ points per decade. And if they didn't do this, what we would see is that the average IQ of the whole population was increasing at a steady rate for the last 100 years, adding up to around a 30-point increase. This is known as the Flynn effect.
Were our immediate ancestors on the verge of mental retardation? Because 70 is normally the score for mental retardation. Or are we on the verge of all being gifted? Because 130 is the cutting line for giftedness.
So, let me get rid of this ad for a second. But let me kind of cut this down here, because I know that might have been a bit confusing, because they're like, hey, how can you say society is declining in knowledge and stuff, and how is our IQ going down, when he just clearly said it's constantly going up, right? Let me pull a little image out here. Where'd it go? Where did it sneak to? Oh, let me see.
Increase. This is known as the steady rate. And if they 100.
There we go.
Now what?
Oh. There we go. So, let's just say, for example, you got a handful of society that are scoring pretty high, right? In this metric. It has to be given to the whole of society to find the norm, right? So even if there's a couple people on the high end, the norm of society is what's making it shift downwards, okay? Maybe this is making a little bit more sense now. So it's not saying that everyone in general is retarded or everyone in general is stupid. What this is reflecting, though, is the norm is going down, okay? That's why it has to keep scaling back and stuff like that each time. Because like you said, you know, at the end of the day, just because you learned what an iPad is and you learned a couple buttons on an iPad, doesn't mean you know the whole workings of an iPad. Doesn't mean you know every little detail of it. So there's so much more knowledge in this field that you don't know, right? And we are evolving at such a rapid pace. So people do, like, compared to what they knew 50 years ago, they didn't know what an iPad was. They didn't know what these buttons were on it. So yes, you are slightly smarter in that sense. But as a whole, everything is going down. So that's kind of the point I wanted to take from this. I'll let this little bit play out here. And I think, like I said, I kind of addressed like the culture thing, right? Some places just don't have access to stuff. I mean, I'm just trying to keep it fair. Here, we'll kind of
are we on the verge of all being gifted? Because 130 is the cutting line for giftedness.
Now,
and I can tell you, like, if people that are arguing, like, no, we are going up. There's no way what I'm seeing in society is a bunch of gifted minds. You could not convince me of that. You are not above 130, some fucking Albert Einstein level shit. No. Your DEI policy does not compare to, like, him equating, like, you know, energy equals mass or whatever. Like, there's no equation to it. None. You're not on his level. Nowhere near.
The genetics of the population haven't really changed over 100 years. So what caused the increase? Well, there is some debate about the true causes, but one of them is probably improving childhood nutrition and health.
You know, height also increased across that time period, right? People got taller and taller and taller.
Another cause is better education.
There's lots of evidence that school makes you more intelligent.
You become better at problem solving if you have more knowledge, because it's easier for you to make associations if you have more things to make the associations with.
A third proposed cause is a shift in the types of work that most people do, from mostly manual labor 100 years ago to much more abstract thinking these days. And that shift may have made us better at answering the types of questions that are asked on IQ tests.
Okay, so that's what I'm going to call it from here. But I want to touch on one thing this fella said here for a minute, and we're going to wrap it up from the video.
You become better at problem solving if you have more knowledge, because it's easier for you to make associations if you have more things to make the associations with.
That is so true. And I just want to emphasize that, because that's what's going to lead us up to our next conversation here that we have coming up about is hypotheticals. I believe the number is, don't quote me on this, we'll go over it, but I think it's like 46% of Americans don't understand hypotheticals. That's the same, like, if you don't have nothing you can draw on, if you got nothing to go from, how can you formulate an argument? How can you formulate a worldview? How can you have no comparison to reference any of your ideology from? And you're seeing that constantly nowadays. I'm not going to try to point fingers on which people are doing it. We all know who it is. But, yeah, it's absolutely insane how we are seeing the decline in things like IQ. We are seeing the decline in things like people not being able to understand hypotheticals. We are seeing the decline, excuse me, of people not being able to think strategically anymore, or even wanting to. We got terms like TikTok brain, TLDR. People don't want to watch a full segment and thing. Even most YouTubers, they even got to keep in mind, like, is my video too long or something? Do I have audience retention and stuff? Because most people can't last more than 4 minutes. That's what it is. Even Putin himself, when he did the invasion of Ukraine, I mean, whether you're for it, against it, whatever, I really don't care. But one of the things he even said during the start is, we're just going to wait. Eventually, over in the West, they forget about things pretty quickly. They don't really keep things going on that long. This was literally his strategy. He literally said this out in the open. He's like, we're just going to bank on the fact that they'll forget about it in 2 weeks. Nicki Minaj will come out with a new video. Cardi B going to start saying some insane shit on here, whatever. Like, they're not even going to remember this in 2 weeks, and then we'll win. They even boasted about that strategy. Think about that. So, you can sit here in the comments and tell me I'm wrong. I would love to hear your input and stuff, but as far as I can tell, we are just in an abysmal decline. And I don't know if there's a way out of it. A lot of people say, like, propaganda is really bad and stuff. I think one of the things we could do is start spreading more positive propaganda. I don't think all propaganda has to be bad. We could be promoting more family units, family households, doing things to incentivize that more rather than incentivizing, single parent households and broken households and stuff, which obviously aren't doing any good for the youth or the children, and nothing's getting done from it. So all these people claiming progress. Go look at the data. How much progress have you made? I think it's very clear. So again, I invite y'all, come into the comments, tell me how I'm wrong, like the video, share it, subscribe, all that good stuff, guys. Keep safe, and we will see you for the next one. And like I said, we will probably be going over, what did I say we were going over there? The hypotheticals. Stay safe. We'll see you guys next time.